The emerald star cast long shadows across the crystalline observational dome of Aurora 9. Inside, amid the soft glow of holographic displays and the gentle hum of quantum computers, Dr. Mara Elwin pressed her palm against the transparent viewing panel, studying the undulating phosphorescent currents of the Xenocea ocean below. After 3 weeks on the research station, she still found herself mesmerized by the alien waters. The Aurelian Empire had maintained dominance across 52 star systems for 3 millennia, its power built upon the absolute supremacy of reason and calculation. Sentimentality was considered primitive, emotional attachments a vestige of less evolved civilizations. Their outpost stations like Aurora 9 existed on the fringes of known space, silent witnesses to developing worlds that had not yet achieved faster-than-light capabilities. First day of independent observation, the question came from Dr. Liara Kin, a xenobiologist who had been stationed at Aurora 9 for 7 standard years. Her silver uniform bore the asymmetrical insignia of senior research staff. Mara turned, smiling. Finally cleared for solo collection. I've been waiting since I arrived. Your enthusiasm is notable, Liara replied, her tone measured in the typical Aurelian fashion, though a slight curl at the corner of her mouth betrayed something more human. The calculators have approved your research parameters? The calculators, high-ranking Aurelian officials who governed through pure logical analysis, maintained strict oversight of all outpost activities, particularly those involving direct observation of pre-contact species. They have limited to invertebrate study in the northeastern quadrant, but it's a start. Mara adjusted her uniform, the junior researcher's insignia still gleaming with newness. At 28, she was the youngest human admitted to the exchange program, a fact that had earned her both respect and scrutiny from her Aurelian colleagues. Liara nodded approvingly. The Xenocea organisms have remarkable regenerative properties. Your proposal on cellular reconstruction showed promise. Thanks to your guidance. Mara glanced at her chronometer. I should prepare. My collection window opens in 40 minutes. As she gathered her equipment in the preparation chamber, Mara couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. Her path to Aurora 9 had been grueling. Years of specialized education, rigorous testing, and countless interviews with stone-faced Aurelian representatives who seemed to regard her humanity as a potential liability. Now, finally, she was here, at the edge of Empire space, studying life forms no human had ever classified. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Captain Rax, head of the station's security detail, appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable as always. Dr. Elwin, I trust you've reviewed the containment protocols again. Mara nodded, 3 times. Captain, nothing leaves the collection chamber without triple verification. See that it doesn't. His eyes, modified with sensory enhancements that gleamed faintly blue in the low light, swept over her equipment. The northeastern quadrant has shown unusual activity in recent cycles. Exercise additional caution. Unusual how? Mara asked, securing her sample containers. Energy signatures not consistent with invertebrate patterns. Likely nothing. Nevertheless, maintain standard alert procedures. Without waiting for a response, he turned and left, his footsteps fading down the corridor. Mara finished her preparations, her mind racing with possibilities. The Aurelians were notorious for their sparse communication. They shared only what they deemed logically necessary. What had their sensors detected, and why hadn't it been included in her briefing? The collection vessel was small but efficient, designed for short excursions into the Xenocea. As Mara guided it away from the station, the emerald star's light filtered through the ocean's surface, creating dancing patterns of green and blue. Below, the translucent invertebrates she had come to study pulsed and glided, their bioluminescent organs flashing in complex patterns. For 3 hours, Mara worked methodically, collecting specimens, recording observations, and occasionally stopping to simply watch the hypnotic movements of the alien ecosystem. The Xenosia organisms operated on principles unlike anything in Earth's oceans. They communicated through light pulses, metabolized energy directly from the star's radiation, and displayed collective behaviors that suggested a form of distributed intelligence. It was during her final collection, as she prepared to return to the station, that she noticed it, a shadow moving against the current, darker than the surrounding water, with a deliberate quality that distinguished it from the drifting invertebrates. Mara adjusted her vessel's sensors, but the readings came back inconclusive. Whatever it wasn't an invertebrate. Protocol dictated immediate retreat and reporting of unclassified organisms, but curiosity, that most human of traits, made her hesitate. She directed a narrow beam of light toward the shadow. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in a burst of movement that sent ripples through the surrounding water, the shadow darted away, moving with such speed that it vanished from her sensors entirely. Mara sat back, heart racing. That was no invertebrate. That was something else entirely, something that moved with purpose and awareness. When she returned to Aurora 9, she debated whether to report the sighting. The Aurelians valued precision without concrete data. Her observation would be dismissed as human imprecision. Instead, she logged her approved specimens and made a private note to extend her search parameters on the next expedition. That night, unable to sleep, Mara found herself wandering the less frequented sections of the station. Aurora 9 was vast, parts of it repurposed from an older structure that predated the current research mission. The abandoned storage bays in the lower levels were rarely visited, their contents deemed non-essential to current operations. It was in one such bay, drawn by a faint, rhythmic sound like labored breathing, that Mara made a discovery that would change everything. Wedged between two storage containers, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting, lay a creature unlike anything she had seen in the station's extensive taxonomic database. Approximately the size of a large Earth dog, its body appeared to be composed of a dense, midnight black substance that absorbed light rather than reflected it. The creature's form shifted subtly even as it remained still, as though its very matter was in constant flux. It was injured. A gash along what appeared to be its side leaked a viscous, silver fluid that pooled beneath it. Each labored breath, if breathing was indeed what it was doing, caused a ripple of distress to pass through its amorphous form. Mara knew the protocol. Unknown organisms were to be reported immediately to the security team for containment and analysis. But something about the creature's vulnerable state stirred something deeper than protocol. Compassion, that troublesome human emotion the Aurelians so distrusted. Looking over her shoulder to ensure she was alone, Mara approached slowly. The creature tensed, its form contracting slightly. It was aware of her. Intelligent, perhaps? "I won't hurt you," she whispered, knowing it couldn't possibly understand her words, but hoping her tone might convey her intention. To her astonishment, the creature's form stilled, as though listening. When she took another step forward, it didn't retreat. Making a decision that she knew violated at least 7 different Aurelian protocols, Mara removed her outer jacket and, with slow, deliberate movements, managed to gather the injured creature into it. The being was surprisingly light, its mass seemingly at odds with its density. The silver fluid, blood, soaked through the fabric. Using her security clearance to avoid the main corridors, Mara transported the creature to her private laboratory. The Aurelians' emphasis on individual research meant that each scientist was allocated personal space for experiments, free from constant oversight, a rare concession to human working preferences. Once inside, she sealed the lab and placed the creature in a containment field, for its safety as much as for protocol. Then, using the medical equipment designed for the Xenosia invertebrates, she began to assess the injury. The wound was severe, a clean slice that suggested it had been caused by something sharp rather than a natural accident. As Mara worked, the creature remained still, its form occasionally rippling but offering no resistance. The silver fluid, when analyzed, revealed a molecular structure unlike anything in the station's database, complex, adaptive, almost programmable in its composition. "What are you?" Mara whispered, more to herself than to the creature. "And how did you end up here?" As if in response, the creature's form shifted, extending a tendril toward the edge of the containment field. When it touched the energy barrier, the tendril didn't recoil as expected. Instead, it seemed to absorb some of the energy, the area around the contact point glowing briefly before returning to its light-absorbing black. Mara's scientific mind raced with implications. This wasn't just an unknown species. This was something that defied the established categories of life as defined by Aurelian taxonomy. It manipulated energy, it responded to presence, it exhibited awareness. And it was wounded, possibly deliberately, making another decision that she knew crossed the line from protocol violation to outright insubordination. Mara disabled the lab's automatic logging system. For the next several hours, she worked to stabilize the creature, applying regenerative compounds designed for the Xenosia invertebrates, which seemed to have a positive effect on the silver fluid, causing it to thicken and slow its flow. Throughout the process, the creature remained docile, its form occasionally extending tendrils that would hover near Mara's hands as she worked, never touching, but following her movements with what appeared to be curiosity. By the time the emerald star rose again, casting its green light through the lab's small observation window, Mara had managed to close the wound and establish a stable environment for the creature. She had also made a preliminary catalog of its observable properties, its response to different energy frequencies, its apparent ability to alter its density, and most intriguingly, its reactions to sound, particularly to Mara's voice. When she spoke softly, the creature's form would become more fluid, less dense. When she remained silent for extended periods, it would contract slightly, becoming more solid. It was almost as though it found comfort in her voice. "I have to go," she told it as the station's day cycle fully engaged, meaning her absence would soon be noticed. "But I'll come back, I promise." The creature extended a tendril toward her voice, then retracted it slowly, settling into a more compact form in the center of the containment field. Mara left her lab, securing it with her personal code, and headed to her scheduled duties, her mind divided between the day's tasks and the extraordinary secret she now harbored. She didn't notice the subtle flicker in the corridor's monitoring system as she passed, or the momentary pause in the data stream that, in any other circumstance, would have captured her nighttime activities. In the central monitoring hub of Aurora 9, the calculators noted the anomaly. Data patterns suggested a brief disruption in Surveillance Sector 7B, correlating with Dr. Mara Elwin's movements, a deviation worthy of flagging, though not yet of direct intervention. The logical course was to observe, to calculate probabilities, to wait for patterns to emerge, the Aurelian way. And so they watched. For the next 14 days, Mara maintained a careful balance between her official duties and her clandestine care of the creature, which she had begun to call Umbre in her private notes, a reference to its shadow-like qualities. Each night, she would return to her lab to find Umbre more active, its wound healing at a remarkable rate, its form becoming more defined, more responsive. By the 10th day, the silver fluid had stopped leaking entirely, and Umbre had developed what appeared to be specialized appendages, tendrils that could extend and retract with greater precision, allowing it to manipulate simple objects Mara placed within the containment field. Most remarkably, it had begun to respond to specific words, not with sounds of its own, but with patterns of movement that Mara recognized as consistent reactions to particular phrases. When she said hello, Umbre would extend a tendril in a gentle arc. When she mentioned light, it would compress its form slightly, absorbing more of the ambient illumination around it. It was learning, communicating, understanding. Mara knew she should report her findings. The scientific significance alone would justify her initial protocol breach. Yet something held her back, a growing suspicion that Umbre's presence on the station was not accidental, and that its wound had not been the result of a natural encounter. Her suspicions were confirmed on the 15th day, when Dr. Liara Kin approached her in the main research hub, her expression tight with concern. "A moment of your time, Dr. Elwyn," Liara said, guiding Mara to a secluded corner away from the other researchers. "There has been discussion among the senior staff regarding anomalous energy readings from the vicinity of your personal laboratory." Mara kept her expression neutral. "My current research involves energy pattern analysis in Xenosia invertebrates. Some fluctuation is expected. The patterns do not match invertebrate signatures." Liara's voice dropped lower. "Mara, the calculators have authorized a security inspection of all research facilities, including private laboratories." Mara's heart raced, but she maintained her composure. "When?" "Tomorrow. First shift." Liara hesitated, then added, "Whatever you're working on, whatever it is that's causing those readings, I suggest you ensure it aligns with your approved research parameters before then." With that warning, Liara departed, leaving Mara to contemplate her increasingly limited options. The inspection would discover Umbre. Protocol would demand immediate containment, analysis, and likely termination. The Aurelians did not tolerate unknown variables, particularly those that demonstrated unusual capabilities. That night, Mara entered her lab with a sense of urgency. Umbre seemed to sense her distress, its form becoming more agitated, tendrils extending and retracting rapidly. "We have a problem," Mara told it, knowing that while it might not understand her words completely, it had demonstrated sensitivity to her emotional state. "They're coming to inspect tomorrow. They'll find you." Umbre's form contracted, then expanded, creating a ripple effect that Mara had come to associate with agitation or concern. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, sinking into her chair. "If they find you here, they'll take you away. They might—" She couldn't bring herself to complete the thought. Umbre extended a tendril toward the edge of the containment field, pressing against it with more force than usual. The energy barrier flickered, and for a moment Mara thought it might fail. But the field stabilized, containing Umbre as it had for the past 2 weeks. An idea formed in Mara's mind, desperate, risky, but possibly their only option. "The storage bay where I found you," she said, standing abruptly. "It's rarely monitored. If I can get you back there, just until the inspection is over." Umbre's form stilled, as though considering. Then, with deliberate movement, it compressed itself into a smaller, denser shape, one that might be more easily transported. Mara deactivated the containment field, half expecting Umbre to seize the opportunity for freedom. Instead, it remained in its compressed form, waiting. Using her lab coat as an improvised carrier, Mara managed to gather Umbre into her arms. Its weight had increased since she first found it, but it remained manageable. With careful movements, she made her way through the station's less traveled corridors toward the lower storage bays. They had almost reached their destination when the corridor ahead suddenly illuminated, and Captain Rax stepped into view. his enhanced eyes immediately focusing on the bundle in Mara's arms. "Dr. Elwyn," he said, his hand moving to the weapon at his hip. "Identify what you're carrying." Mara froze, her mind racing. "Research materials for my invertebrate study." "In a restricted area, outside authorized research hours?" Rax took a step closer, placed the bundle on the ground and stepped back. Mara hesitated, tightening her grip slightly. "Captain, I can explain." "Now, Doctor." His weapon was drawn now, aimed not at her but at Umbre. What happened next occurred so quickly that Mara's human senses could barely process it. Umbre surged from her arms, its form expanding and flowing like liquid shadow. Before Rax could fire, Umbre had engulfed his weapon hand, causing him to cry out, not in pain, but in shock. The weapon clattered to the floor as Umbre released Rax's hand and retreated back to Mara, coiling around her protectively. Rax stared, his enhanced eyes wide with disbelief. "What is that?" he demanded, reaching for his communication device. "Please," Mara said, stepping forward with Umbre still wrapped around her. "It's not dangerous. It's injured. Was injured. I've been helping it recover." "That thing is not in any approved study," Rax said, his finger hovering over the emergency alert. "It's not even in our taxonomic database." "Because it's new," Mara argued, desperation making her bold. "It's a discovery. Isn't that what we're here for? To discover?" Rax's expression hardened. "We're here to observe according to protocol. Doctor, that creature," he gestured at Umbre, "is a protocol violation of the highest order." Before Mara could respond, the station's alert system activated, bathing the corridor in pulsing red light. Rax's communication device chimed urgently. "Security breach in research sector," came an automated voice. "All personnel, initiate containment procedures." Rax's eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Mara insisted, genuinely confused. "I've been here with you." Rax raised his communication device. "Captain Rax reporting. Location, Storage Sector 5C. I have Dr. Mara Elwyn and an unclassified organism, requesting immediate—" He never finished the transmission. From behind him, a second Umbre-like creature emerged from the shadows, its form more angular, more aggressive than the one wrapped around Mara. With lightning speed, it enveloped Rax, cutting off his communication and dragging him into the darkness of an adjacent corridor. Mara stood frozen, processing what she had just witnessed. Not one creature, but two, and the second one had just abducted a security officer. Umbre pulsed against her, its form becoming more agitated. It extended a tendril in the direction the other creature had gone, then retracted it sharply, as though warning her away. The alert continued to blare. Soon, the entire security team would be mobilized. Mara made a split-second decision. "Come on," she whispered to Umbre, turning back the way they had come. "We need to hide." They retreated to her laboratory, the only place Mara could think of where she might have some advantage. Familiar territory. Equipment she understood. Controls she could override. Once inside, she sealed the door and activated the enhanced privacy protocols she had installed for her unauthorized research. "What was that?" she asked Umbre once they were secure. "Another one like you?" Umbre's form rippled in a pattern Mara had come to associate with negation. Not quite a no, but a rejection of the premise. "Not like you, but it looked similar." Umbre extended multiple tendrils, arranging them in a pattern that Mara struggled to interpret. Then, apparently recognizing her confusion, it altered its approach. It compressed part of its form into a rough approximation of its own shape, then created a second, similar but distinctly more angular shape beside it. "You're showing me the difference," Mara realized, "between you and the other one." Umbre's form rippled in what appeared to be affirmation. "Are there more of you? More of them?" Before Umbre could respond, the laboratory door reverberated with a heavy impact. "Security override in progress," announced the station's automated system. "Stand clear of entry points." Mara's time had run out. The Aurelian security forces were about to breach her lab, and with them would come the calculators, whose logical assessment would almost certainly result in Umbre's immediate containment and likely termination. "Hide," she told Umbre urgently. "If you can, I'll try to distract them." Umbre did not retreat. Instead, it expanded its form, positioning itself between Mara and the door. Its surface began to shimmer with a strange silvery energy that Mara had never observed before. The laboratory door slid open, revealing a security team led by Commander Oran Vec, the station's highest-ranking Aurelian officer. His cold, analytical gaze swept the room, fixing first on Umbre, then on Mara. "Dr. Elwyn," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "you have violated 17 distinct protocols, endangered station security, and concealed an unclassified organism of potentially hostile intent." "It's not hostile," Mara insisted, stepping forward despite Umbre's protective position. "It was injured. I helped it. It's intelligent, Commander. It can communicate." Vec's expression remained impassive. "The creature will be contained and analyzed according to protocol. You will be detained pending further investigation." He signaled to the security team, who raised specialized containment devices, energy nets designed to immobilize without killing. "Please," Mara said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "don't hurt it." Umbre's form pulsed with increasing intensity, the silvery energy growing brighter. The security team hesitated, their training not having prepared them for this specific scenario. Commander Vec showed no such hesitation. "Contain the organism," he ordered. "Use lethal force if necessary." The first energy net was deployed, expanding as it flew toward Umbre. What happened next defied everything Mara thought she knew about physics and biology. Instead of being ensnared, Umbre absorbed the energy net entirely, its form briefly glowing with the captured energy before releasing it in a controlled burst that disabled the laboratory's main power systems. The room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the emergency lights and the now brilliant glow emanating from Umbre. In the confusion, the security team fired again, this time with weapons set to stun. Umbre moved with impossible speed, interposing itself between the beams and Mara, absorbing each energy blast without apparent harm. Then, with deliberate precision, it released a wave of energy that knocked the security team off their feet without causing permanent injury. Only Commander Vec remained standing, his enhanced Aurelian physiology more resistant to the energy discharge. "Fascinating," he said, his analytical mind already cataloging Umbre's demonstrated abilities. "It prioritizes your protection." "I told you," Mara said, her hand resting lightly on Umbre's now pulsing form. "It's not hostile unless threatened. It understands." Vec considered this, his calculating mind visibly processing the implications. A symbiotic bond, perhaps, or a more complex relationship. He tapped his communication device, Security Containment Team to Research Laboratory 12, Maximum Protocol. Mara realized with sinking certainty that Vec had no intention of understanding Umbre, only of containing and studying it, regardless of its demonstrated intelligence. The Aurelian way, knowledge through dissection, understanding through control. "Run," she whispered to Umbre. "Get out while you can." To her surprise, Umbre did exactly that, but not in the way she expected. Rather than fleeing the laboratory, it surged forward with incredible speed, engulfing Commander Vec completely before he could react. For a terrifying moment, Mara feared it might harm him. Instead, Umbre seemed to be interfacing with him somehow, its form pulsing with rapid patterns of light where it made contact with Vec's head. After several seconds, Umbre released the commander, who collapsed to his knees. his expression for the first time showing something other than analytical detachment, shock, and perhaps a touch of fear. "What did you do to him?" Mara asked, rushing to Vec's side despite their adversarial position. Umbre's form rippled in a pattern that Mara had begun to associate with information transfer or communication. Before she could interpret further, the laboratory doors slid open again, revealing a larger security team led by Dr. Liara Kin, whose presence in a security operation was unusual enough to momentarily distract Mara. "The station is under lockdown," Liara announced, her gaze moving from Vec to Mara to Umbre. "All research personnel are to report to secure holding areas. The calculators have initiated emergency protocols." "Liara," Mara began, "I can explain." "There's no time," Liara cut her off, stepping into the laboratory and sealing the door behind her, leaving the security team in the corridor. "The second creature, the one that took Captain Rax, it's not alone. There are more of them. They've infiltrated the station's lower levels." Commander Vec, recovering his composure, rose to his feet. "How many?" "At least 7 distinct energy signatures," Liara replied. "They're disrupting our systems, interfering with communications. The calculators have ordered evacuation of non-essential personnel." Mara looked at Umbre, whose form had become eerily still. "Do you know about this?" She asked it directly. "Are they with you?" Umbre extended a tendril toward her, then toward the laboratory's main console. With surprising dexterity, it manipulated the controls, bringing up the station's internal sensor grid. The display showed multiple anomalous energy signatures moving through Aurora 9's lower levels, converging on the research sector. "It's helping us," Mara realized aloud. "It's showing us where they are." Commander Vec studied the display, his analytical mind already formulating containment strategies. "Why would it assist against its own kind?" "Because they're not its kind," Mara said, understanding dawning as she observed the pattern of movement. "At least, not exactly. They're different somehow." Liara moved closer to the display. "They're heading for the primary research database, if they access it. They'll have all our data on the Xenocea," Vec concluded, "and on every other world under observation." The implications were staggering. If these creatures, whatever they were, obtained the Aurelian research data, they would have access to information on dozens of developing worlds, potentially disrupting the careful balance the Empire maintained through its policy of non-interference until civilizations achieve faster-than-light travel. "We need to stop them," Mara said, her scientific curiosity temporarily overshadowed by concern for the broader implications. "Umbre can help. It knows them." Vec's expression hardened. "The creature remains an unknown variable. Containment is the only logical—" "With respect, Commander," Liara interrupted, her tone firm. "Logic dictates we use all available resources. If Dr. Elwyn's Umbre can assist, refusing its aid would be irrational." A tense silence followed as Vec calculated probabilities, his enhanced mind weighing variables with Aurelian precision. Finally, he nodded. "A temporary alliance of necessity. The creature will assist in containment of the intruders, after which all protocols will be reinstated." Mara looked at Umbre, which had remained attentive throughout the exchange. "Will you help us?" she asked it directly. "To stop the others?" Umbre's form rippled in what appeared to be affirmation, then it extended a tendril toward the laboratory door, indicating readiness. The unlikely alliance moved through Aurora 9's corridors, guided by Umbre's apparent ability to sense the other creatures. Commander Vec coordinated with security teams via his still-functioning command channel, positioning them to intercept the intruders before they reached the central database. As they approached the research core, the signs of infiltration became more evident. Disabled security barriers, fluctuating power systems, and most alarmingly, several security officers found unconscious but unharmed, each bearing the same silver residue that had leaked from Umbrai's wound when Mara first discovered it. "They're disabling rather than killing," Liara observed as they passed another incapacitated guard. "That's unexpected." "Tactical," Vec countered, minimizing resistance while maintaining access to the station's layout through limited neural interfacing. Mara glanced at Umbrae, which had paused near one of the fallen officers, its form extending a tendril that hovered just above the silver residue. "What is it?" she asked. "What are you sensing?" Umbrae's form pulsed with an urgency Mara hadn't seen before. It extended multiple tendrils toward a nearby access panel, manipulating it with surprising skill to bring up a schematic of the research core. "It knows the station layout," Vec said, his tone suggesting this confirmed his suspicions of hostile intent. "Or it's learning it," Mara countered, watching as Umbrae highlighted a specific section of the schematic, not the primary database as they had assumed, but an adjacent laboratory used for energy pattern analysis. "That's not the main database," Liara said, confusion evident in her voice. "Why would they target a secondary research lab?" Commander Vec studied the schematic, his enhanced vision detecting patterns in the station's power distribution. "The energy lab draws directly from the station's main reactor, if they gain control of it. They could cause a cascading failure," Mara finished, understanding the implications. "The whole station could lose power." "Including life support," went unspoken but understood by all. Umbrae pulsed again, more urgently, and began moving toward the highlighted laboratory without waiting for the others. Mara followed immediately, with Liara and Vec close behind. They arrived at the energy lab to find the door sealed from within, the security override unresponsive. Through the reinforced observation window, they could see 3 of the shadow creatures gathered around the main energy distribution console, their forms more angular and aggressive than Umbrae's, pulsing with the same silvery energy but in patterns that seemed discordant, almost chaotic. "They're accessing the power grid," Vec said, his enhanced vision detecting the energy fluctuations. "We have approximately 7 minutes before they gain full control." Mara turned to Umbrae. "Can you get us in there? Can you communicate with them?" Umbrae's form contracted slightly, then expanded toward the sealed door. Instead of attempting to manipulate the control panel, it pressed its entire form against the door's surface, seemingly melting into the material itself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hiss, the door slid partially open, just enough for a person to slip through. "Remarkable," Liara whispered. "It phase-shifted through the molecular structure." Vec raised his weapon. "I will engage the intruders. Dr. Kin, secure the console. Dr. Elwyn, remain here with your associate." "No," Mara said firmly. "Umbrae comes with me. It's our best chance at communication." Before Vec could object, Mara slipped through the partially opened door, Umbrae flowing through beside her. The 3 shadow creatures immediately detected their presence, abandoning the console to form a defensive triangle, their forms pulsing with increasing intensity. Mara raised her hands in a universal gesture of non-aggression. "We don't want to fight," she said, knowing they might not understand her words, but hoping her tone and posture would communicate her intent. "We want to understand why you're here." The creatures made no response, their forms becoming more angular, more threatening. Behind them, the energy console continued to flash warning indicators as their infiltration program worked to override the station's safety protocols. Umbrae moved forward, positioning itself between Mara and the other creatures. It began to pulse with a complex pattern of silvery light, a form of communication Mara couldn't interpret but which clearly affected the intruders. Their forms became less angular, though they maintained their defensive posture. One of the creatures, slightly larger than the others, extended a tendril toward Umbre in what appeared to be a response. The exchange continued for several seconds, a silent conversation of light pulses and form changes that left Mara fascinated despite the danger. Behind her, Vec and Liara had entered the laboratory, moving cautiously toward the console while the creatures were distracted by their exchange with Umbre. The largest creature suddenly detected their movement, its form surging toward them with alarming speed. Vec fired his weapon, the energy beam striking the creature directly, but instead of harming it, the beam was absorbed, just as Umbre had absorbed the energy nets earlier. The creature retaliated, releasing a focused pulse that knocked Vec backward into a research station, rendering him momentarily stunned. Liara froze, caught between advancing to the console and retreating to safety. Umbre's reaction was immediate and decisive. It flowed across the laboratory floor with liquid grace, interposing itself between the aggressive creature and the Aurelians. The two shadow beings engaged in what could only be described as combat, though unlike any combat Mara had ever witnessed. They merged and separated, pulses of energy flowing between them, their forms constantly shifting in what seemed to be a battle for stability rather than physical dominance. Seizing the opportunity, Mara rushed to the console, her research experience allowing her to quickly identify the infiltration program. "Liara," she called, "I need to override their access." Dr. Kin joined her, her fingers flying over the controls. "The primary protocols are locked. We need command authorization." Mara looked over at Commander Vec, who was struggling to regain his footing, still dazed from the energy pulse. "Commander, we need your authorization code." Vec staggered to the console, his enhanced physiology already recovering from the attack. "Aurelian command code Vec Epsilon 971, he rasped, pressing his palm against the biometric scanner. The console acknowledged the override, allowing Mara to begin counteracting the infiltration program. As she worked, the battle between Umbre and the lead intruder intensified, their energy exchanges becoming more violent, sending ripples of disruptive force throughout the laboratory that caused equipment to malfunction and observation screens to shatter. The two other shadow creatures, previously held at bay by Umbre's intervention, now moved to join their leader, recognizing the threat to their operation. Liara, showing unexpected courage, positioned herself between them and the console, wielding a piece of broken equipment as an improvised weapon. "Hurry, Mara," she urged, her eyes fixed on the approaching threats. "I don't think I can hold them off." Mara's fingers flew across the console, implementing a cascading lockout that would isolate the energy distribution system from external control. "Almost there," she muttered, bypassing security protocols with techniques that definitely weren't included in her official training. The shadow creatures reached Liara, who swung her makeshift weapon in a wide arc that passed harmlessly through their amorphous forms. One of them extended a tendril that wrapped around her wrist, causing her to cry out as silver energy pulsed along her arm. Vec recovered enough to fight, fired his weapon again, not at the creatures themselves, but at the ceiling above them, causing a shower of debris that momentarily disrupted their forms and forced them to release Liara. "Done," Mara announced as the console flashed green, indicating successful isolation of the power grid. "They can't access the main reactor now." The laboratory's lights flickered, then stabilized as the station's automated systems reasserted control. The lead shadow creature, still engaged with Umbre, seemed to recognize the failure of their plan. It separated from Umbre with a final, violent pulse that sent equipment flying across the laboratory, then retreated toward its companions. For a moment, the two sides faced each other in tense standoff. Mara, Vec, and Liara by the secured console, Umbre slightly ahead of them, and the three shadow creatures now gathered near the laboratory entrance. their forms pulsing with what appeared to be agitation or perhaps communication. Then, with synchronized movement that suggested a collective decision, the three intruders flowed toward the laboratory wall and through it, their forms phasing through solid matter just as Umbre had phased through the door earlier. "They're escaping," Vex said, already activating his communication device. "Security alert, intruders heading toward the outer hull, Sector 12E. Umbre moved to follow them, but Mara called out, "Wait, are you going with them?" The shadow being paused, its form rippling in a pattern that seemed hesitant, conflicted. It extended a tendril toward Mara, then toward the direction the others had gone. "I think," Liara said softly, observing the exchange. "It's torn between loyalties." Vex's expression remained coldly analytical. "The creature assisted us. That is sufficient to warrant reconsideration of its status. However, containment protocols must still be—" He was interrupted by the station's alert system activating with a different tone, not the urgent blare of security breach, but the deep, resonant pulse that indicated a station-wide announcement from the calculators themselves. "Attention all personnel," came the emotionless, synthesized voice that represented the collective decision of Aurora 9's governing AI cluster. "Station lockdown initiated, all research suspended, preparation for evacuation protocols to commence immediately. This is not a drill." Vex's communication device chimed with a priority command channel. His expression, as he listened to the message only he could hear, shifted subtly from analytical detachment to something approaching concern. "The intruders have been detected approaching the station's quantum communication array," he informed them once the transmission ended. "If they access it, they could potentially transmit our entire research database to an unknown receiver." "Is that their goal?" Mara wondered aloud. "Information theft?" "Unknown," Vec replied, "but the calculators have determined the risk unacceptable. They have authorized emergency protocol Omega-7. Liara gasped, her usual composure cracking. "Omega-7? But that would—" "What is Omega-7? Mara demanded, looking between them. Vec's expression remained impassive. "Station self-destruct. The calculators have determined that the loss of Aurora 9 is preferable to the potential compromise of Aurelian research data across 52 observation sites." The implication struck Mara like a physical blow. Self-destruct would mean the death of everyone aboard, over 300 researchers, technical staff, and security personnel. "There has to be another way," she insisted. "We can stop them. Umbre helped us before. It can help us again." "The decision has been calculated with optimal precision," Vex stated, though Mara thought she detected a hint of regret in his tone. "The sequence has already been initiated. We have 47 minutes to reach the evacuation vessels." "Evacuation," Liara echoed. The announcement mentioned preparation, not immediate evacuation. "The calculators have determined that a staged evacuation would create unacceptable risk of panic. Essential personnel will be notified individually. The rest—" Vec hesitated. "The rest will be informed when the critical research materials have been secured." Mara's blood ran cold as she understood. "You're not planning to evacuate everyone, just the ones the calculators deem essential." Vec did not deny it. "The primary mission is preservation of knowledge. The evacuation vessels cannot accommodate the entire station complement." Mara turned to Umbre, which had remained attentive throughout the exchange. "Can you stop this? Can you help us reach the communication array before they do?" Umbre's form pulsed, extending tendrils toward both Mara and the laboratory exit. Its intent seemed clear. It was willing to help, but they needed to move quickly. "I'm going with Umbre," Mara announced, her decision made. "We'll try to stop the intruders before they reach the array. That course of action has a probability of success below 17%, Vex stated, The logical choice is to proceed to the evacuation vessels. Then I'll be illogical, Mara replied, moving to stand beside Umbre. I won't abandon hundreds of people to die when there's a chance to save them. To her surprise, Liara stepped forward to join her. The commander is right about the probabilities, she said with a small smile, but I've always found that humans have a way of defying statistical models. Vex studied them, his enhanced mind visibly calculating variables, reassessing the situation. Finally, he said, I will coordinate the evacuation. If you succeed in securing the communication array, contact me on Emergency Channel Theta. I will attempt to delay the Omega-7 sequence. It was as much support as they could expect from an Aurelian commander bound by his programming to follow the calculator's directives. Mara nodded her thanks, then turned to Umbre. Lead the way. Guided by Umbre's apparent ability to sense the other shadow creatures, Mara and Liara made their way through Aurora 9's increasingly chaotic corridors. The station's personnel, unaware of the true nature of the emergency, were following standard lockdown procedures, securing research materials, backing up data, preparing for what they believed would be a temporary suspension of operations. They encountered several security teams, which Vex authority allowed them to pass without detailed explanation. The commander had kept his word, at least in that regard. As they approached the communications sector, signs of the intruder's passage became evident. Disabled security barriers, fluctuating power systems, and occasionally, security personnel rendered unconscious by the same silver energy signature Mara had observed earlier. They're not killing, Liara noted as they checked yet another incapacitated guard. Even now, they're disabling rather than eliminating obstacles. Which suggests they're not inherently hostile, Mara replied, her scientific mind still analyzing despite the urgency of their mission. They have a specific objective. The question is, what? Umbre, moving slightly ahead of them, paused at an intersection, its form pulsing with what appeared to be indecision. It extended tendrils in two different directions as though sensing conflicting signals. What is it? Mara asked, approaching carefully. Have we lost them? Before Umbre could respond, a shadow darker than the surrounding dimness detached itself from the ceiling above them, dropping down with liquid grace to form a barrier between them and the path ahead. It was one of the intruders, its angular form pulsing with silvery energy that cast eerie patterns on the corridor walls. Mara froze, uncertain whether to retreat or attempt communication. Beside her, Liara tensed, ready to defend them if necessary. Umbre moved forward, positioning itself between the humans and the intruder. The two shadow beings began their silent communication again, pulses of light, shifts in form, tendrils extending and retracting in complex patterns. They're negotiating, Liara whispered, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. Or arguing, I can't tell which. The exchange continued for several tense seconds. Then, to Mara's surprise, the intruder's form became less angular, its pulsations slowing to a rhythm more similar to Umbre's. It extended a tendril not toward them, but toward a side corridor they had not noticed. I think, Mara said slowly, it's showing us another way. Umbre turned to them, its form rippling in what appeared to be confirmation. It moved toward the indicated corridor, pausing to ensure they would follow. Mara hesitated only briefly before making her decision. We follow Umbre, she told Liara. If it trusts this communication, then so do I. The new path took them through maintenance tunnels and rarely used access corridors, avoiding the main routes where they might encounter more security teams or station personnel. The intruder led the way, with Umbre close behind, occasionally extending a tendril back toward Mara as though ensuring she was still following. Finally, they emerged into a small observation room overlooking the quantum communication array, a massive structure of crystalline matrices and energy conduits that allowed instantaneous transmission across the vast distances of the Aurelian Empire. Below, they could see the remaining two intruders working to bypass the array's security systems, their forms extending into the control interfaces in ways that suggested deep technological integration. "They're almost through the final firewall," Liara observed, her enhanced vision allowing her to read the status displays from their elevated position. "Once they access the transmission protocols, they can send whatever they want, wherever they want," Mara finished. "But what are they trying to transmit, and to whom?" The intruder that had guided them extended a tendril toward a secondary console in the observation room, one that displayed the array's current data buffer. Mara approached cautiously, studying the information. "This is strange," she said, frowning at the display. "They're not accessing our research database at all. They're trying to transmit a single, compressed data packet, something they already have." Liara joined her at the console. "Can you determine what it contains?" Mara manipulated the controls, using her research clearance to examine the buffer more closely. "It's heavily encrypted, but the structure suggests—" She paused, her eyes widening. "It's a distress signal, a very sophisticated one, but that's the basic pattern." "A distress signal?" Liara echoed, confusion evident in her voice. "To whom?" Before Mara could respond, a new alert sounded, different from the previous warnings. A deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the station's very structure. "Omega-7 sequence accelerated," announced the emotionless voice of the station's automated system. "Final phase initiating. Time to critical, 15 minutes. "They're speeding up the self-destruct," Mara realized with horror. They must have detected the intruders at the array. The shadow being that had guided them pulsed with increased urgency, its form becoming more agitated. It extended multiple tendrils toward the window overlooking the array, then toward Umbre, the silent communication between them intensifying. "I think they're running out of time," Liara said, watching the exchange. "Whatever they're trying to do, the self-destruct will prevent it." Mara made a decision that went against every protocol she had been taught, against the logical framework that governed the Aurelian Empire itself. "We need to help them send their message," she announced. Liara stared at her in shock. "Help them? Mara, we don't even know what they are, let alone what message they're sending or to whom." "I know they haven't killed anyone," Mara replied firmly. "I know Umbre helped us when it could have escaped. And I know that, right now, our only chance of stopping the self-destruct is to remove the reason for it." She turned to Umbre. "If they complete their transmission, will they leave the station? Will they stop interfering with our systems?" Umbre's form rippled in what appeared to be affirmation, extending a tendril toward Mara, in a gesture she had come to interpret as one of trust or agreement. "Then we help them," she decided. "Liara, your clearance is higher than mine. Can you bypass the final security protocols on the array?" Liara hesitated, visibly torn between Aurelian protocol and the evidence before her. Finally, she nodded. "I can, but Mara, if we're wrong about this—" "Then we'll face the consequences together," Mara said, placing a reassuring hand on her colleague's shoulder. "But right now, this is our best chance to save everyone on this station." With Liara's higher clearance, they were able to access the array's control systems from the observation room. Working quickly, Liara bypassed the security protocols that the intruders had been struggling with, opening a transmission channel that would allow the compressed data packet to be sent. Below, the two shadow beings at the main array control center seemed to sense the change, their forms pulsing with increased intensity as they integrated more deeply with the system. The data packet moved from the buffer to the transmission queue, prepared for instantaneous quantum dispatch to coordinates that Mara couldn't decipher but which clearly lay far beyond Aurelian space. "Transmission initiating," Liara announced, watching the status indicators. "Once it's sent, we'll need to contact Commander Vec immediately. If the intruders keep their end of the bargain and withdraw, he might be able to convince the calculators to abort the self-destruct." The array hummed with power, the crystalline matrices aligning as the quantum transmission prepared to fire. 10 seconds. 5, 3. The observation room door slid open with a hiss, revealing Commander Vec flanked by a full security team, their weapons drawn. "Stop the transmission," he ordered, his voice cold with Aurelian certainty. "The calculators have calculated the risk as unacceptable, regardless of intent." Mara stepped forward, placing herself between the security team and the console. "It's too late, Commander. The transmission is already processing, and it's not what you think. It's a distress signal, nothing more." "The content is irrelevant," Vec replied. "The recipient is the concern. Unknown entities with technology capable of interpreting quantum transmissions represent a potential threat to the Empire." "Or potential allies," Mara countered. "Not everything unknown is hostile, Commander. Sometimes it's just different." The array pulsed with brilliant energy as the transmission completed, the data packet sent instantaneously across vast interstellar distances to its unknown destination. The shadow beings below disengaged from the control systems, their forms rippling with what appeared to be satisfaction or relief. "Transmission complete," Liara confirmed, checking the console. "The data packet has been sent." Vec raised his weapon, aiming not at Mara or Liara, but at Umbrae. "The transmission may have been completed, but the protocol violation remains. The creatures will be contained and studied. You both will face disciplinary action for your roles in this breach." Before he could continue, his communication device chimed with the priority tone that indicated direct contact from the calculators. As he listened to the message only he could hear, his expression shifted from determination to confusion. "The calculators have revised their assessment," he announced, lowering his weapon slightly. "The Omega-7 sequence has been suspended pending further analysis." "What analysis?" Mara asked, hardly daring to hope. "The quantum transmission has been partially decoded," Vec explained, his tone suggesting he was still processing the information himself. "It contained identification codes and positional data, not research information. The calculators are recalculating the threat assessment based on this new data." Liara moved to the console, accessing the station's status reports. "The self-destruct has been aborted," she confirmed. "Station systems are returning to normal operation." Below, the shadow beings were moving away from the array, heading toward an exit that would lead them back into the station's main corridors. Umbrae extended a tendril toward the observation window, then toward Mara, its form pulsing with what she had come to recognize as a request for her to follow. "They're leaving," she realized. "Now that their message is sent, they're withdrawing." Vex studied the retreating shadow beings, his analytical mind still calculating probabilities and outcomes. The logical course is to contain them for study. Their capabilities represent significant scientific value. "And if they resist?" Mara challenged. "More injured personnel, more damaged systems? Commander, they've achieved their objective. Let them go. And perhaps we can establish communication on more equal terms." The conflict between protocol and pragmatism played out visibly on Vec's features, a rare display of uncertainty from an Aurelian officer. "Finally," he said, "the calculators have authorized me to use discretion in this matter. The creatures will be allowed to depart, provided they cause no further disruption." It was a significant concession, one that suggested the calculators themselves were reassessing their understanding of the situation. Mara nodded her thanks, then turned to Umbre. "Lead the way," she said softly. "Let's make sure they leave peacefully." Over the next hours, Mara, Liara, and Commander Vec followed the shadow beings through Aurora 9's corridors, maintaining a careful distance as the creatures moved with purpose toward the station's lower levels. Station personnel, now aware that the emergency had passed but not of its true nature, watched with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension as the strange procession passed. Finally, they reached a seldom-used docking bay in the station's oldest section. Inside, to everyone's surprise, was a small vessel of unfamiliar design, sleek, dark, and seemingly composed of the same light-absorbing material as the shadow beings themselves. "They had a ship here all along," Liara said, her scientific curiosity evident despite the circumstances. "Hidden in plain sight." "Not hidden," Vec corrected, studying the vessel with his enhanced vision. "Masked. Its energy signature was calibrated to match the background radiation of the station. Quite impressive." The shadow beings flowed into the vessel without hesitation, their forms merging with its structure in a way that suggested they were as much a part of it as it was of them. Only Umbre remained outside, its form pulsing with patterns that Mara had come to associate with contemplation or decision-making. "It's torn," she realized, watching as Umbre extended tendrils toward both the vessel and toward her. "It doesn't know whether to stay or go." "The creature assisted us against its own kind," Vec observed. "Such behavior suggests complex motivations beyond simple biological imperatives."
"I don't think they're its kind."
"Exactly," Mara said, approaching Umbre carefully. "At least, not in the way we understand the concept. They're related, but different."
Umbre's form rippled in a pattern that seemed to confirm her assessment. It extended a tendril toward her, then toward the vessel, then back to her again. "I think," Liara said softly, watching the exchange, "it's asking you to choose, Mara, whether it should stay or go." Mara felt the weight of the decision, understanding that what happened next would affect not just Umbre's fate, but potentially how the Aurelian Empire would approach encounters with unknown entities in the future. The logical choice, the Aurelian choice, would be to keep Umbre for study, to extract knowledge that might benefit the Empire. But Mara had seen enough to know that there was more to Umbre than could be learned through clinical analysis. Its choices, its apparent affinity for her, suggested a complexity of being that deserved respect rather than dissection. "Go," she told it gently. "Go with them. I'll be all right." Umbre's form contracted slightly, a reaction Mara had come to associate with uncertainty or reluctance. It extended a tendril toward her hand, hovering just above her skin without making contact. "It's okay," she assured it. "This is your chance to return to wherever you came from. Whatever sent this ship for you clearly values you enough to risk a lot to get you back." Umbre's form pulsed once more, then it flowed toward the vessel, merging with its structure just as the others had done. The ship's surface rippled, absorbing Umbre completely, then stilled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, without sound or visible propulsion, the vessel began to rise, lifting from the docking bay floor with elegant precision. It hovered briefly, as though giving them one last opportunity to object, then accelerated toward the bay doors, which opened automatically to release it into the emerald-tinted void beyond. "Remarkable," Liara breathed as they watched the vessel diminish against the backdrop of stars. No conventional propulsion signature, no quantum distortion. It's as though it's moving through space itself rather than through the space between. Vec activated his communication device, The unidentified vessel has departed. Tracking systems are attempting to maintain lock, but its signature is fading. Within moments, the ship had vanished completely from both visual observation and the station's advanced tracking systems, leaving no trace of its presence save for the memories of those who had witnessed its departure. The aftermath of what would come to be known as the Shadow Incident brought significant changes to Aurora 9. The calculators, their logical frameworks challenged by encounters that defied conventional analysis, initiated a comprehensive review of protocols regarding unknown entities. Commander Vec, influenced perhaps by his brief neural interface with Umbrae, became an advocate for a more nuanced approach to first contact scenarios. Liara's research shifted focus, incorporating new hypotheses about the relationship between energy patterns and consciousness, inspired by what she had observed in the shadow being's communication methods. And Mara, though officially reprimanded for her protocol violations, found herself the subject of increased interest from the highest levels of Aurelian scientific hierarchy. Her experiences with Umbrae, documented in extensive debriefings, suggested possibilities that even the calculator's vast processing capabilities had not previously considered. 3 months after the incident, as Aurora 9 settled back into its routine of observation and analysis, Mara was working late in her laboratory when her console chimed with an incoming communication on a channel she didn't recognize. Unusual energy signature detected. Northeastern quadrant of the Xenosea, came the automated alert. Matches parameters established for priority observation. Curious. Mara accessed the sensor data. The readings showed something moving beneath the alien ocean's surface, something that absorbed light rather than reflected it, that created patterns of energy not consistent with the invertebrates she had been studying. A shadow darker than the surrounding depths. Mara smiled and began preparing her collection vessel. In the void beyond the Emerald Star, undetected by Aurora 9's most sensitive instruments, a vessel of liquid shadow maintained its vigil. Within, beings of dark matter and silver energy communicated in pulses of light and form, their patterns conveying concepts that transcended language. Patience, observation, preparation. And for one of their number, a concept that the Aurelian Empire, with all its logical precision, had never fully understood, but which humans like Mara Elwyn carried in their very nature. Loyalty. The Emerald Star continued its ancient rotation, casting long shadows across the crystalline dome of Aurora 9, while beneath its alien ocean, something waited to be found again.